Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leela and I love to read queer, trans, and feminist literature. And today I am going to do the Rory Gilmore reading challenge quiz. I love this format of video. I find them to be very comforting, kind of like how so many of us rewatch Gilmore Girls as a comfort show. There is certainly an element of that for me. I did watch Gilmore Girls with my mom and I am an only child of a single mother-daughter dynamic. There is a lot about the show that I relate to deeply and find very emotional. However, much of its feminism falls rather flat for me. I find its reproductive politics to be quite atrocious, particularly the fact that abortion is an unnamed non-option throughout the series and sex is almost always punished for our female characters. Lane Kim deserved so much better. My favorite podcast of all time, formerly known as Witch Please, now called Material Girls, has done an episode about this called Norm Porn Ex Gilmore Girls, where they interview the author of the book Norm Porn, which is about how queer viewers find comfort in normative TV. And I really resonate with that episode's treatment of these topics. And then I did go and read the Gilmore Girls chapter in that book, which I found quite resonant as well. What I find most resonant from these observations is how interesting it is that Alexis Bledel, who played Rory Gilmore, went on to play a lesbian member of the resistance in The Handmaid's Tale, which is a classic feminist story about reproductive injustice. I did also start watching The Handmaid's Tale with my mom, but personally had to stop when Rory Gilmore had her. That was traumatic. But anyway, all of that being said, I love Rory's character. I love that she is a reader. I love her iconic quote, "I live in two worlds. One is a world of books." Love that. And so here we go. Got my laptop. Let's do the Rory Gilmore reading challenge quiz. This is the listchallenges.com quiz, which the Book Leo used in her video of this format. I would also just say that there was a time in my life when I had the ambition of reading the entire Rory Gilmore list. I've even had ideas of I could write a book about it. I could make a journal where I talk about like the history of each book, and that episode of Gilmore Girls could be a sticker book. Like, by the way, literary agents, if you want to make that happen with me, let's go. But I think I kind of let go of that because I realized that for myself and my interests and what I want to read in my one wild and precious life, Rory Gilmore / the writers and creators of this show are not necessarily my role model in terms of my political or literary interests. So I respect Rory, she can do her, and I will do me. And that is beautiful. Okay, here we go. 1984, I read in high school. Alice in Wonderland, I read. Anna Karenina, I have read. It did take me 5 years to read that book, and I did enjoy it very much. I find it beautiful and really fucked up how basically a woman is punished for being a slut and she dies. I would like a better ending personally, but I love Kitty and her dress. That's so cute. I have not read The Diary of Anne Frank. I think, I've just been afraid to. My mom has read it. I remember I once actually went to the beach with my mom and my aunt, and they had each respectively brought a book to read. My aunt had brought a diet book and my mom had brought The Diary of Anne Frank to read on the beach. The Art of Fiction. I haven't read this one, but I did once randomly pick up an Art of Fiction book, I think by James Salter, off like the shelf at the new school library that I loved. I have not read Autobiography of a Face. I think I'm scared to, but I have read Truth and Beauty by Anne Patchett, which I thought was truly beautiful. Backlash by Susan Faludi. I have read this book. I became aware of it because of this list, and I listened to the audiobook and I found it extremely fiery and highly informative and relevant to the current, ongoing, highly needed, urgent, important struggles of the feminist movement and feminist movements, based on an understanding of history that this is all so precedented and there has always been resistance and there always will be, and there is so much that we can learn from the past. And this book particularly illuminated my understanding of the phenomenon of trad wives, tradwifery, conservative values, women's oppression being presented as something countercultural and a sort of appropriation of feminist messaging. Just so much power in this book. I truly highly recommend it to everyone to raise their feminist consciousness. The Bell Jar I have read multiple times. Beloved, definitely on my TBR, have yet to read. Beowulf. I think I might have read that in my undergrad in creative writing. I think maybe I didn't read the whole thing, so I won't give myself the check mark. The Bhagavad Gita, I have not read, but have certainly picked it up off the shelf at a hostel. Rory backpacking in Europe vibes. Bitch and Praise of Difficult Women by Elizabeth Wurtzel. I really want to read. I have all of Wurtzel on my TBR. I know that she is like an icon of my icons type of thing, like particularly Marie d'Arsigny loves her and has written about her in, I think, Taunt. I've started but not finished The Catcher in the Rye. I've not read Charlotte's Web, but I want to because I think it's referenced in Sweetener, which I want to read. I have read A Christmas Carol, very Christian. I have read A Clockwork Orange. I read that in CEGEP in college before university, which we have in Quebec, and I, surprisingly to myself, loved this book. I had a really nice edition. I loved annotating it and I loved reading it. I found it to be like crisp, fun, enlightening. I don't know if I would feel that way if I read it again, but I definitely loved my experience reading it when I read it then. Eudora Welty, I have not read. I know that Anne Patchett loves her. The complete poems of Anne Sexton, I have not read. I've read some Anne Sexton, but I would like to read the complete. I would also like to read her daughter's memoir, and I would love to read Heather Clark's forthcoming biography of Plath and Sexton. I love Heather Clark's biography of Sylvia Plath. Read Comet, highly recommend. The Crucible, I have not read, but I have seen the production which Tavi Gevinson was in New York, and that was really fun. I also saw her in The Good John Proctor, which I loved as well. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime I read in high school. I think that author is not autistic, so I know it's a little bit controversial. I've not read any Isabella Linda I'd like to. Death of a Salesman I've not read, but that does remind me of the iconic Buffy scene in season 4 where they're doing a play in Willow's Nightmare and there's a line about a man, a salesman. So does that count? The Divine Comedy I have read at Liberal Arts College. Don Quixote I have not read, I'd like to. The Complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe I have not read. I actually have like a physical book that is his complete works. I would like to read it all one day, but I have not yet done that. Eloise I have certainly read and loved. I absolutely adored Eloise as a child. I dressed up as her once when I was a kid for my friend's costume birthday party. I love Eloise. I still want to be her. Emily the Strange. Okay, so at one point I decided that I wanted to read the Emily the Strange books. Aesthetically, she seems like extremely aligned with me and my girlfriend, and I had gotten the ones that I could access. By the way, that's my girlfriend's cat Kitty snoring if you can hear him. I had gotten the ones that I could access from the library, and I started reading them backwards accidentally. I think I had gotten like 3 and 4, and I started 4 thinking that it was 3, but then the vibe of the book made me feel like it was actually really appropriate for me to read the series backwards, like to start with 4 and make my way down to 1, because I did relate to the character of Emily Strange who is presented. But anyway, I put it down. I did not finish it, and I have yet to pick up book 1. Emma by Jane Austen, I have started, and I read it when I was Emma's age. I think she's 21. I just didn't finish it. It's like on my like softy enough like to finish at some point. I think I'm like 75% of the way through. I love Clueless. Does that count? Encyclopedia Brown Boy Detective, I feel like I definitely read as a child, but I'm team Harriet the Spy. I hope that's on here. Shout out to Dawn Summers. Edith Wharton, I've not read this one, but I read one Edith Wharton for an NYC Novels book club that I participated in, and I listened to Tavi Gevinson's interpretation of Glimpses of the Moon. Aristotle's Ethics. I have not read this complete book, but I have read excerpts of Aristotle in Liberal Arts College, and I would like to go on the record and say, fuck Aristotle, fuck you, you original sexist with your fucking sexist views on form and matter and like masculine domination. I can't with you and your fucking hierarchy of species. How about the democracy of species by Robin Wall Kimmerer instead? I really can't emphasize enough my issues with Aristotle for his supreme influence on the millennia of patriarchy that has been dominating planet earth. And no, fuck you, Aristotle. And in conclusion, fuck Aristotle. I hope that's clear. Fahrenheit 451 I've read and loved. I can't with the fat phobia on Gilmore Girls. I really can't. Fellowship of the Ring I haven't read. I might want to read it like with a critical lens, because from what I gather, there's like literally no women in this story, and nature is like a background, like non-sentient object, and the fairies are passive. And I feel like, speaking of Aristotle and the death of nature and the reign of patriarchy and disenchantment, this is like a relevant text. I did read The Hobbit in high school. I'm not sure if that's on here. Ayn Rand I have not read, but I get the vibe, and the vibe is cursed. Frankenstein I have read and loved, of course. This is exactly what I'm talking about with the vibe of Gilmore Girls. Judith Butler's Gender Trouble next to George W. Bush'isms. I have not actually read Gender Trouble, but I have read some Butler articles throughout my education in women's studies. But honestly, I have yet to really get into Butler. I find them hard to understand, to be honest, but maybe soon I'll be resilient enough to work my way through it. Girl Interrupted I have read and absolutely adored. Let's see. Great Gatsby I have read. Fuck F. Scott Fitzgerald, Team Ella, all the freaking way. Great Expectations I have not read. I'd like to though. Hamlet I have read. And Ophelia Forever. Harry Potter I've read. And it may be the most influential book of my life. And may we have Transliberation now. I haven't read these like more historical Shakespeare's, though I was in a Shakespearean acting troupe in high school. I don't know if that gets me some bonus points. My big role was Viola, if you're interested, and I was also Fairy in Midsummer Night's Dream. And I was Jessica, the Jew. The Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Have I actually read that book? I've seen the movies. And I love that Taylor Momsen recently put out a remake of Where Are You Christmas? Cindy Lou Who to Pretty Reckless arc. I love that. That is like my generation, and I am there. How the Light Gets In, that's a nice name. Howl I have read because of Rory Gilmore. Do I resonate? Not really. Dante's Inferno, I thought we already covered that. The Iliad I have not read, but I did read The Odyssey in liberal arts college. I wish that counted. Inherit the Wind. I was actually in a production of Inherit the Wind when I was in 7th grade. I was the agnostic reporter, but I didn't read the book. I read the script that they gave us, so I won't give myself that point, but I think I deserve a bonus point for having been in a production. I was the reporter, my friend was the lawyer. I like shook hands with them and I was like, hello devil, welcome to hell. Jane Eyre I have read. I actually have an unwritten thesis about how the pagan goddess shines through in Jane Eyre through its like lunar and fairy and Dianic imagery, though upon rereading for that thesis I found it kind of like really depressing of like how much of a Christian morality tale was, and like really horrific in terms of the, you know, ex-wife, the like crazy ex-wife in the attic and the marriage to this like extremely terrifying man. But I'm choosing to read it as like a feminist horror novel, though I think it's a Christian novel, but I choose to read it as a feminist horror novel with Dianic lunar goddess worship shining through. Kite Runner I'd like to read. Letters to a Young Poet I've read. Little Women. Speaking of feminist horror novels, Jesus Christ, I hate how Joe has to marry a man. My little lesbian, I love you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And also it's so scary how Marmee is like, I feel angry every moment of every day. The secret is to never show your anger and just be a subservient, dutiful little wife. So scary. Lovely though. Lord of the Flies I read in high school. The Lovely Bones I haven't read, but I remember my childhood best friend's older sister reading it. Macbeth I've read. Let's go, witches. Okay. Also, can we talk about the fact that this play was written with witchcraft in it to interest King James I of England, who was an avid witch hunter, like literal witch hunter, and also the King James of the King James Version Bible, which I actually realized when I was rereading Jane Eyre with that whole like idea of whatever. But like that is the foundation of our Christian patriarchal whatever culture, is King James Version, James I of England, literal witch hunter. Anyway, I'm team witch all the way. I hope that's obvious. Madame Bovary. I am halfway through Madame Bovary and have been since I started reading it when I was probably 17. I am 26. So you know what? I might just restart that from the beginning. Maybe I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be a married woman with depression in France, but maybe I am now. Or maybe not. I will be. I believe, and I learned this from reading The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, that you should never force yourself to read a book that you don't want to read, because there is such a thing as right book, right time. I really experienced this. I feel like I honestly practice bibliomancy, or am in tune with the divine magic and truth of bibliomancy for Twilight Sparkle reader girlies like me, where the right book comes to you at the right time. And if you let yourself read what you want to read, when you want to read it, you will hear what you need to hear, when you need to hear it. You will find the messages and stories that resonate with you at the right time in your life. And I think I just wasn't ready for Madame Bovary, but I have started it in French and plan to finish it someday. Master and Margarita, I would love to read because of the cover. Mémoire d'une jeune fille rangée. I've read the beginning, and I remember noticing that Nancy Houston's memoir matched Simone de Beauvoir's, and being really interested in that lineage of feminist memoir when I was in CEGEP. And actually, that reminds me of something meaningful in my life as a writer, where during that time, when I was in that French class where I was presenting on Nancy Houston, and I think Simone de Beauvoir's memoir starts with her birth, but Nancy Houston starts with like the larger story of her family. So it's kind of like a difference between like an individual versus a collective POV. And I remember at that time I was like really finding my voice, or beginning to find my voice as a writer. And I remember asking that professor, what is feminist writing today? Like, here I'm reading, I'm learning like feminist writing from the past. What is feminist writing today? And she said, girl, like, leave that to the critics. Okay, she didn't say it like that. She was like, write what you need to write, and that will be feminist. If you're coming from a feminist perspective, or just from like a lived experience of being a femme, of being a witch in times of patriarchy, write what you need to write. And the inherent liberation of that experience will be feminist, and then the necessary form will reveal itself naturally from that place of need. And then, you know, future generations can analyze why that mode, why that form was necessary at this time from a feminist perspective. But it's not up to you to worry about that. I really hold on to and resonate with and appreciate that message. Anyway, I have not read the whole thing, so I will not give myself the check mark. Metamorphosis I've not read. Middlesex I have not read. Moby Dick I've not read. Mrs. Dalloway I have yet to read this book. I am reading Orlando for my in-person book club next month, and I wonder if I'll go on a little wolf kick. I have read, of course, A Room of One's Own, and I have read The Waves, but maybe I wasn't ready for Dalloway yet. Again, right book, right time hasn't been mine with this one yet. The Name of the Rose. I've started this. I think I might have brought it to Italy. Umberto Eco was like definitely a like celeb in my literary theory courses in college, and I remained very interested in this book. I think like I got a little bit bored with like the masculinity of the monks, but like I resonate with monks in a way. Like my maternal great-grandmother's maiden name was Sofer, meaning that my family were scribes of the Torah, like sacred scribes, and I feel a monkish streak within myself, a monastic streak, because I love to read. Basically, I love to read and write. I for sure would have been a nun if I were living in like early modern times. No thank you, husband. I want to live, I want to read. But yeah, have yet to finish that one. The Nanny Diaries I've not read. Nervous System, or Losing My Mind in Literature, that sounds interesting. New Poems of Emily Dickinson. I've certainly read poems of Emily Dickinson. I don't think I've read this particular collection, and I haven't read the complete works. I plan to read the complete works in my life. I find it interesting reading Emily Dickinson because some of her poetry, I am like, yes. Extreme, introverted, lesbian, nature lover, yes. But also she is like from an early pioneer, patriotic American family, and some of her poems are like so like frontier patriotism core in a way that horrifies me. Night. I don't think I've read that one. Northanger Abbey. Is this the one where they go to Bath? Yes, I've read Northanger Abbey. I liked that one. I remember there was something about lavender water, and I was like, yes, I love lavender water. Norton Mythology, no. Of Mice and Men. I think that is the one that I read. Yeah, I read Of Mice and Men. I also read The Pearl in 5th grade. I read Of Mice and Men, I think in 6th grade. Diary of a Wimpy Kid, no. On the Road, I have not read, but I have read My Life on the Road by Gloria Steinem. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, no, I have not read, but I have read Chronology of Water by Lydia Yuknovich, which I found really powerful. I loved it. I'm really excited that Kristen Stewart is producing a film adaptation of it. And I also loved Negative Space by Lily Danziger, who studied under Lydia Yuknovich. So anyway, in the memoir Chronology of Water, Yuknovich writes about her father's sort of idolatry of Ken Kesey and how she herself then studied under him. Oryx and Crake, I have not read, but I did go to the launch of this book at the Rialto Theatre in Montreal, put on by Toronto Quarterly. I remember that very clearly. I went with my mom and my cousin. Growing up in Canada with a second wave feminist mother, you hear a lot about Margaret Atwood. And listen, I've read The Handmaid's Tale, speaking of Rory Gilmore, and I've read other Atwoods like throughout my time in school. The Outsiders, I loved The Outsiders. I couldn't believe it was written by a woman. Like, I read it not knowing that, and then I got to the end and I was like, wait, what? I loved it. Perks of Being a Wallflower, I've read. Picture of Dorian Gray, I have not read yet, but I definitely plan to. I think I started it on audio and that wasn't right for me. I need to like read the book and study and annotate. Please kill me. I feel like I've seen this, but I haven't read it. Pride and Prejudice, I've read when I was a teenager. My mom loves Jane Austen. Okay, page 6 of 9. We are doing good. The Raven and Other Poems by Poe, I have not read. Read The Raven. Rapunzel, I think I've certainly read fairy tales, but I don't know. Okay, reading Lolita in Tehran. I have read this book. It made me feel very close to my grandmother who grew up in Iran. I loved it for that and for her love of literature. I obviously resonated with that. What I remember finding interesting is that this book to me has a vibe of almost like equating all things like Western and American with liberation, which like in the context of the story, like I understand, but I also understand why. With that in mind, this is the book about Iraq and Iran, which is where my family is from, that has seen the most mainstream success in America. Rebecca, I have not read yet, but I actually have it right next to me. I plan to read this book very soon. The Red Tent, I have not read, but I know my mom has read. Like, I definitely saw my mom reading that when I was a kid. Romeo and Juliet, I've read. A Remove One's Own, I've read. The Scarlet Letter, I haven't read, but I'd like to understand how we got to where we are. I know he was from Salem, Massachusetts. The Second Sex. I have certainly read essays within this book and the introduction and parts of this book. When I was 16, I started a feminist book club with the girls in my neighborhood and our moms, and I think maybe the first book that I set was The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. Not one essay from it, the entire book, and I didn't finish it, and neither did anyone else in my book club. This is obviously a foundational feminist text. I'm glad that there is a new English translation. The original English translation that arrived in America in the second wave feminist movement, the women's liberation movement, was actually translated by a zoologist. This newer translation is actually translated by like feminist scholars, thankfully. I would like to read in French though. I actually bought the first volume, Les Faits et les Mythes, Facts and Myths, in Paris when I was there, and I would like to read that. I would like to read the whole thing in English, and I would like to read the whole thing in French. Sense and Sensibility. I think I haven't read this one. I think I might have started it but not finished it. I think this is her first one. Yeah, first one. Yeah, I haven't read this one, but I'd like to. Henry Miller. I read Tropic of Cancer. Hated it. So sexist. Love Annie Snean though. The Shining I haven't read. Slaughterhouse 5 I've read. As long as there are slaughterhouses, there will always be war. Let's see. Sophie's Choice. I think this is that book of philosophy. Oh, I was thinking of Sophie's World. Swan's Way. I have read De Retour de chez Swann in French for a Proust book club that I started, where we actually did not get past volume 1, but we did read volume 1, and I would like to read this edition, which is the Lydia Davis translation, because I really enjoy Lydia Davis's writing. Who doesn't? To Kill a Mockingbird, I read in high school. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I have certainly started this book more than once, and each time I just stop at the anti-Semitism. Truth and Beauty. I was just talking about that. I've read that book. I love it. Ulysses. I know he is a big influence on Sylvia Plath. Unabridged Journals. I've started this book. I actually have it right in front of me as well. I'm like 60 pages in. I think I feel like I'm violating someone's privacy. It makes me uncomfortable to read something that someone didn't intend to be read by a public audience from like a consent perspective. But of course I'm interested in literary genius Sylvia Plath. And it is interesting to see also, you know, her homophobia and racism and feminism that she was having all at the same time as a white woman in America in the 50s. Valley of the Dolls I've not read, but I watched the movie and I love the Pink Book. I have an edition of the Pink Book, but I have not yet read. Uncle Tom's Cabin I have not read, but I have read the essay in Women Racing Class by Angela Davis in which she talks about this, and I find it really interesting to note that this like book by a white woman, which did get more and more people on board with abolition, was in and of itself still racist. Bird and Suicides I've read because I am a rookie reader and rookies remember. War and Peace I have not read, but shout out to my cousin Katie who has a baby, and I asked her if she was finding it hard to read in early motherhood because I've heard that, and she was like, no, I've been reading so much on my e-reader. I reread War and Peace. Wicked, I definitely read the first page, and I think there was something fucked up on there about like Elphaba being intersex, but that like was not dealt with in like a thoughtful way. The Wizard of Oz I read as a child. wild. I think it's definitely full of problematic stuff, but also isn't it interesting that L. Frank Baum's mother, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, was a suffragette who was the first to raise public consciousness about the idea that the witch trials were an attack on women. I'm sure she and I would have many points of disagreement were we to meet today with our respective contexts, but I think that is pretty fucking cool. And it's interesting that then her son went on to write about witches. Wuthering Heights, I have read twice. I love the iconic line about whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same. The Year of Magical Thinking I have read, and I remember one of Maggie Nelson's works, she talks about how it's interesting that Joan Didion said that she didn't identify with being privileged because her daughter died, and Maggie Nelson added the contribution that what's maybe more interesting there is the fact that privilege can't protect us from human tragedy. So that is page 9 of 9. Let's show my results. 41 of 339, 12%. Wow. Well, okay, that was fun. So that is my Rory Gilmore reading challenge. I hope that you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you did. It truly means so much to me. I would absolutely love to know if you take this quiz, how you score, what your favorite or least favorite books on this list are, your thoughts generally on Gilmore Girls, the Rory Gilmore reading challenge, etc. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.